Thanks for joining me for another video. This is the one I know everyone is curious about, the Omega Crux versus the Crux Prime. We're on the 2019 USBC Open Championships doubles and singles pattern, and both balls are at 3000 grit. The Omega comes that way out of the box, while the Prime comes at 2000, but they're both at 3000 for this video to key in on the comparison better. The Omega is unmistakably a Crux. Those of you who have been around long enough to remember the Crux Pearl, and the Alpha will undoubtedly recognize this shape. The rolly controllable and continuous motion with just enough pop to make it look good for most bowlers on most conditions. It reminds me a lot of the original Crux, a smoother physics, or perhaps the Crux Pearl if it had some surface on it. On the shots, I didn't straight flag one way or the other. It looks really good, and even on my terrible shots, it left me with not terrible spare attempts, which is a big deal on this tough of a condition. It stabilizes incredibly well in the mid lane without fully committing to digging in and taking off. Now, in situations where something like the physics is just too much and the Prime's too slow, the Omega is kind of what brings balance to the force. As something like the Wild Streak continues to find more and more use for me, the Omega I think will take on a similar role for heavier patterns. We'll see what happens over the next couple months, but I have a big tournament coming up, plus a couple sweepers where it will likely see some action. Now, when we look at the Prime, it can be a little deceptive. It looks like it's both smooth and slow, and yet kind of sharp at the same time, which has a lot to do with my release nuances. If I try to shape it more, it'll respond. If I try to round it out, it'll round out. This is true of most balls, but spec's a little different, particularly on the Prime. The gravity evolves shapes and acts like a virtual gravity. It's quicker and straighter down lane. The Pro motion's just butter. It's smooth and super predictable. The Prime kind of fits in the middle, and it's still the most unique spec ball for me. I think you can see it's definitely earlier than the Omega. It starts digging in and slowing down sooner, but on some shots where I play a little more angle, it almost looks sharper than the Omega. But on others, when I'm firmer with it through the middle and more up the back of it, it gets super smooth and lets me get away with misses quite a bit further inside than the Omega would let me get away with. From left to right and front to back on this pattern, it almost feels like the Prime lets me get away with more. On the fresh, I feel like the Prime is the ball to start out with, but after a game or two of transition, I feel like you could use the Omega the last 4 to great success. I know they'll both be in my bag when Nationals comes around, and that's the plan. I likely won't be able to use either of them on the team pattern. I'll use the Prime again for track burning and practice at least, but as far as actually scoring when the lights turn on, these two could be a wicked 1-2 punch on this pattern. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the Omega and the Prime. Thanks for watching.
Oh,